それでは、本日はですね、中継という形で、オープンファイナンスネットワーク、セキュリティトークン等ですね、投資ですとか勉強されている方はご存知ではないでしょうかね。いわゆるセキュリティトークンを、取引するプラットフォームになっております。で今日はですね、お時間作っていただきましたので、私が今やっております日本デジタルアセット協会、通称 JDAA と呼んでるんですけれども、オープンファイナンス様とですね、インタビューをさせていただきますので、本日もよろしくお願いいたします。Hi, so let's start the interview. My name is Ryota. Nice to meet you.
And my name is Fumi. Nice to meet you. So I will be doing an interview in English. So could you please start with introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Juan Hernandez. I am the founder and CEO at OpenFinance Network. We are a US registered alternative trading system, an ATS.
Yes.
Registered to trade alternative assets and digital securities like security tokens, STOs. We're based out of the US, but we serve both US and non-US investors on our platform.
Okay, thank you. That's great. And thank you for joining today. So let's start off with the first questions. So first question is, what kind of future do you foresee in private offering market? And of course, you're doing STO and you're the exchange for security tokens. So could you please talk about what you foresee in what's going to happen in private offering as the market?
Sure. I mean, certainly security tokens or blockchain technology provides a mechanism by which these private offerings can be conducted in a more efficient fashion. Mm-hmm. And so we see the private offering market growing significantly because of this new technology and because of the opportunities that it creates, both for investors and for the issuers, the folks that are doing the actual offerings of the securities. And so we see a revitalizing of this industry because of this new distributed ledger technology.
Okay, thanks. So, I mean, of course, a lot of people talk about the increasing liquidity due to STO is very important in this market. And do you also see that liquidity will also definitely increase if everyone would tokenize the private offerings or do the offering in STO?
Yes, certainly once you have the option of liquidity, I think it creates a much more fluid environment. The thing about these private offerings or alternative assets is that historically they have been very illiquid. And so once you held one of these assets in your portfolio, it was very, very difficult for you to sell it or move it somewhere else. And so distributed ledger technology creates a much smoother and efficient mechanism to transfer, to trade these assets. So certainly there still has to be a lot of high quality assets to come to market so that people want to buy and sell these securities, but the technology makes it a lot easier and smoother than it has been historically.
Okay, that's great. But I start here. What do you think is in order to bring liquidity into the market, what do you think is the most important factor in the future development?
Certainly, it sounds obvious, but high quality institutional level product. And so there has to be high quality security tokens on the market. If these are just small securities that don't have a lot of value, then you won't get a lot of interest. But if there are institutional level products, and then there will be a lot more interest both from retail and institutional investors alike.
I see. And do you think that's going to come in 2019? Or maybe?
I believe so, yes. I mean, perhaps second half of 2019, but we see a lot of, in the pipeline, we see a lot of projects coming to market soon that we feel will be at that caliber of quality. And just, you can see a lot of the big names that are starting to step into the general blockchain market, and names like Fidelity and Goldman Sachs. And so it should not surprise you to see some of these big names start to step forward towards the second half of this year.
Okay, and of course, the market will keep growing, right? After
that's the intent. Certainly, as more and more validation enters the market, more people will be comfortable participating in these offerings.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it is good that, once private offering market gets more liquidity, companies will be able to raise funds or raise capital from investors a lot more easier than used to be, because there's more liquid, investors willing to come in if the investment itself is high quality product. But yeah.
Yeah, correct. Yes, I mean, certainly, liquidity begets liquidity. So as more and more participants enter the market, it'll can snowball into a larger base of participants.
Yeah. So one of the things we keep thinking about it is the 12G.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, you're the expert in this field. But one thing we thought about is 12G. Because for the people who's listening or watching or going to watch this video in the future, let me explain.
Sure.
So 12G, basically it's obligation. If you have if you go above a certain number of beneficiary owners, there will be some reporting obligations. But one thing we thought, if the liquidity increases in security token market, and especially that tokenize the private offering, do you think it will be more, the regulations and the issuers will face more reporting obligations and more heavier obligations in the future?
So the interesting about Section 12G rules is that it indicates beneficial owners.
Right.
And so, apologies, sorry. That actually indicates holders of record. Beneficial owners is for investment funds. So investment funds can only have 100 beneficial owners in the United States, for example. So there are limitations there, but a private company can have 2,000 holders of record. And that's also 12G. What's interesting there, though, is that holders of record has been constructed in a way that if you hold the security tokens with a custodian and through a broker dealer, then you are able to count the broker dealer as one holder of record. And so there are mechanisms to allow for greater liquidity in private companies. Certainly, custodians and broker dealers allow for a much more fluid environment. And all of this, of course, is handled at the smart contract level, whereby the smart contract in combination with wallet verifications, you can control US versus non-US and accredited versus non-accredited participants to ensure that your offering doesn't trigger any adverse reporting requirements.
Okay, that makes sense. So is that mean, so does that mean like OpenFinance Network works very close with custodians and issuers and, designing the smart contracts for number of, the record keepers won't go beyond this 2,000 or?
So we work closely with our partners on smart contracts in ensuring that the smart contracts are compliant with rules and restrictions on secondary market transfers. And so we also do testing ourselves of some of these contracts and obviously do reviews of the mechanisms to ensure that we feel confident that these smart contracts can comply with the rules.
Okay, that's nice. So let's go outside of 12G. Yeah. There's so many regulations that's going to be interesting. And of course, we as people from Japan like us, we are very interested in security tokens. And I know private offerings, you got to do a lot of due diligence and a lot of hard work, a lot of research, you know, to see what's good investments are. But we still want to do some, if it's possible, do investment in STO. And how are you going to, how are you going to handle security regulations outside of United States especially? Could you please talk about that? And we are very interested if you know anything specific about Japanese people.
Sure. So there are, the big thing that we have to look out for in foreign jurisdictions is the issue of a qualified investor.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, the EU has a very specific definition of qualified investor.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to the US accredited investor rules,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, obviously specific to Europe, and they're, you know, they limit, for example, the number of participants that can be in one of these private offerings to 150 non-qualified investors per EU state. And so these are things that we account for. And again, working with our partners, you know, that logic is included in the smart contract level. And so when a transfer occurs, it checks both the buyer and the seller, but both their wallets or their investor passports, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
It verifies, you know, residency, you know, just checks the residency of each of the participants, and then is able to verify the total shareholder count. And so in examples like in the United States with the accredited, you know, either 12G rules or accredited investor limitations, or in EU, qualified investor rules, or in Japan, similarly with qualified investor mechanisms, we're able to verify and ensure that only qualified participants can participate.
Okay, that's good. That makes sense. Okay, so actually there aren't many questions left, but you know, there's so many startups, especially the issuing platforms out there, and I'm sure you get asked this question quite often. You know, there are so many protocols out there, and I keep hearing people saying we need standardization of the protocols.
Yep.
So do you foresee that STO protocols will be integrated into one protocol in the future, or what kind of future do you see in security token protocols?
You know, there are a lot of security token protocols out there. You know, we work with our partners on supporting a number of them. Ultimately, for us, it comes down to which protocols are being used, which ones are actually on mainnet.
Okay.
With security tokens. So there are more security token protocols that are just on paper than there are security token protocols that are being used actually in production on mainnet. And so certainly, you know, some of the partners that we work with who have tokens either live or are ready to launch tokens soon, you know, those are the ones that we're focused on right now. Longer term, do I believe there will be a universal open source standard? Yes, absolutely, because all of these security token protocols are open source. And what we're already starting to see is that people are mixing and matching and taking the best parts of one protocol and including them in their protocol. And so slowly there's an evolution, and longer term, we'll see, you know, effectively, you know, so similar to ERC20 or you know, the Open Zeppelin, you know, smart contract bases, that there's no need to recreate the wheel and have to undergo a smart contract audit every single time you want to roll your own security token. Let's take advantage of best practices. Let's take advantage of code that's already been battle tested and that we know that works. And that's something we're pushing for there as well. We want to see a standardization. We want to set best practices in the industry. And so we work with our partners to ensure that they each are taking into account a lot of the different rules and including them in their smart contracts. And so slowly we're seeing a lot more collaboration across the industry. And so it's just a matter of time before there's that universal open source standard.
Okay. Do you think, maybe I shouldn't ask. I wanted to ask you this, but I wanted to ask what's your favorite protocols, but I shouldn't ask.
You know, we do our best to remain neutral. You know, we value all of our partners. I mean, certainly, you know, there are, well, what's great is they're all open source, like I said. And so you can go to GitHub and review these open source, these smart contracts standards. You can read the white papers behind them, and then you can see them in production, right? You can go on Etherscan and look at the contracts addresses and kind of see the number of transactions and how they work. And that to me is one of the more exciting things about this industry, is that it, you know, it's built on this open source nature. And so, you know, it's, you know, I think there's enough information out there for people to pick their own favorite protocols.
So, but because so many protocols out there, is that possible? Is it quite easy to adapt your ATS system to different protocols, as you know? Or, you know, I think that's going to be really important in the future if you want to scale it as an alternative trading system, like be able to trade many different protocols. Is that technically not that difficult thing, or?
It is and it isn't. It's difficult, and it's, you know, well, I'll start with the easy part. It's not that difficult because, again, now that we've been at it for several months and we've been working with a lot of our partners, there's already starting to be a little bit of best practices and standards put into place, right? It's kind of clear the components that these smart contracts need. That being said, everyone is still working on their own flavor of the smart contract protocol. And so the difficult part is then, obviously, as we integrate a new smart contract protocol, the security audits around it, right? I mean, ideally, again, this goes back to, you know, for example, using Open Zeppelin's tools for ERC20 contracts. You know, ideally, there's a standard that's open source that has been audited already and has already been used in production, and everyone kind of builds off of that base. So it's not that difficult to do just the pure technical integration, but it is difficult to do the security integration, ensuring that there aren't any flaws in the smart contract, you know, doing the code audit. As you may know, you know, there aren't great testing tools on Ethereum. And so it's very challenging to be able to undergo that smart contract audit and review process. And so that makes it a challenge to integrate new standards, which is why we're pushing for a standardization and a uniform interface across the board that everyone can adopt.
Okay, that's good, and that makes sense. Okay, so that off from technical side, let me ask you about the business side of Open Finance Network, if that's okay. So, you know, Open Finance Network, we are seeing you guys as the leading ATS in STO security tokens, and we hear a lot of good news about Open Finance Network. Okay. So what is the, I should say, competitive advantage compared to other security token exchanges and maybe national exchanges that wants to come into STO market?
Sure. And so I'll kind of talk across the spectrum a little bit. So initially, right now, you know, certainly we, you know, Open Finance was the first platform, ATS platform, to launch, to be able to accept both, work with both U.S. and non-U.S. investors. And initially, you know, our focus, you know, is on being that compliant, regulated platform in the face of other platforms that are not regulated, right? That are still trading, you know, ICOs or something. And so we provide a very regulated, secure environment where investors can trade with confidence. You know, as others have started stepping into the market as well, certainly for us, you know, we feel that we have the most robust platform today. We have a full order book matching engine mechanism, charting tools on our platform. You can view historical pricing data for these assets, and you can trade 24/7 on our platform in an automated fashion. There's not someone manually matching the trades, and our platform doesn't close on nights and weekends. So we're open 24/7 because we understand that the crypto markets are all open 24/7. So that's sort of some of our initial differentiators. Certainly longer term, we believe that the alternative asset market is where we're focused on. Instruments like private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, some of these private companies, that's our core focus, and that's where we specialize in. We've been active within this market, the alternative asset market, since 2014. So we bring a lot of experience. Pre-crypto is when we started, and so we're very familiar with all of the rules and procedures and the ins and outs of this market. Longer term, when you mentioned national exchanges, and so NASDAQ or FTSE or whatnot, certainly they work in a different asset class. They work with public equities, things like Microsoft stock, Google stock, and there are different rules and requirements around those instruments. For us, as I mentioned, alternative assets, that's our wheelhouse. That's where we specialize in. And these are different asset classes and different rules. And so you won't find a private equity fund that's trading on NASDAQ, right? But likewise, we don't trade Google stock. We don't trade Microsoft stock. These are just different things. And so although sometimes we get compared to a NASDAQ, we trade very different things. And so that's how we set ourselves apart from some of those national exchanges.
Okay. So based on that, I assume your goal in 2019, 2020 is to bring more traders, bring more liquidity into OFN, and bring more assets into OFN, tokenized assets.
Yes. I mean, for us, it's when you think about how you get more participants on the market, it starts with the product. It starts with the supply on the platform. That means more high quality tokenized assets. And so a lot of what we do is we work with our partners. We work with other institutional entities that are interested in participating in this market. And so a lot of what we do is going out and cultivating the industry and helping them build up the infrastructure in the industry so that these high quality tokenized assets can start listing. We see ourselves very much as infrastructure builders. It's such early days still, and we know that we need to work with all the other participants in the market to be able to grow the industry to where we think it needs to be.
Okay, so I'm kind of out of questions now, which is a good thing for you.
That's good.
So, what is your hope in 5 years, 10 years? Where you want to get there? Where do you want to go?
So this alternative asset market is a $7.7 trillion market. And so for us, we think, I believe personally, in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a major adoption of distributed ledger technology by this industry. And it's simply because it's just much more efficient than what's out there today. And that's to the benefit of investors, both U.S. investors and international investors who it's historically been very difficult to participate in these offerings, and to gain access to these types of investment opportunities. And so to me, the more that this industry could, the more assets that come on chain, the more access the global network of investors has. And so I believe that's a 2 to 3 year process. Others believe it's a 3 to 5 year process, but for the most part, at least the folks that we talk to believe that it's going to happen simply because it's just so much more efficient than the current technology we have today. And so, the cost savings and the operational efficiencies alone is what's going to drive a lot of these institutional entities to start working with this technology. And you're already seeing it today with the Goldman Sachs and the Fidelities of the world, the JP Morgans. I mean, they're all exploring this technology because there's a huge opportunity in cost savings alone. And so that's something that over the next 2 to 3 years or 3 to 5 years, depending on who you ask, is going to be a major shift. And that's going to be, something that it's going to change how we invest, just period. It's going to change how everyone invests in these types of opportunities.
Right. And I think that's also going to happen. And I was thinking like 5 to 10 years, but
depends on who you ask, right?
Depends on how the regulator thinks as well. But I think as far as I have talked to many people in U.S. security token industry, they regulate as a very collaborative, and they like what we're doing. So because all the things going to get automated. Do you kind of see that thing as well?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if obviously, if you're intent on working within the regulatory rule set, there's a lot of opportunity here, and the regulators have been very collaborative. I think the SEC has said publicly they're not looking to stifle innovation, and we've seen that exemplified in their conduct as well. That they're, at the end of the day, they just want to make sure that investors are protected. And that's what all this regulation is for. It's for investor protection. And so if they, once they've started to understand that this technology actually allows you to protect the investor better, that there's been a lot more of a, I think, receptive audience. But now that we're able to show that via the smart contracts, you can enforce a lot of these transfer restrictions that used to only be on paper. You can catch the bad actors early, right? You don't have to wait for someone to report a fraudulent activity. It can be detected a lot sooner. And so there's definitely a very collaborative approach that's been taken by the regulators, and there's a lot of room for innovation right now within the current market.
Okay. Well, thank you. So actually, the question before, I wanted to end there, but I really wanted to ask you about how you're working with the regulators. So sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah.
So thank you for your time, and thank you for your time for the interview and answering all the questions. And hope OFN do great things in the security token market.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And if viewers are interested in learning more about the platform, you can visit the platform at openfinance.io and learn more about what we're working on.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thank you.